So we continue with our next speakers, Konstantinos Farsalinos. He is a physician and senior researcher specializing in public health at the universities of Patras and West Attica in Greece. He has conducted extensive research on smoking, tobacco harm reduction, and vaping since 2011, publishing over 90 studies and articles. Notably, he authored the first systematic review on the safety and risk profile of e-cigarettes in 2014, and his research was influential in shaping the EU's regulatory framework on vaping. In 2020, he was recognized as a highly cited researcher for his significant impact in global science. And during the pandemic, he published studies exploring the relationship between smoking, nicotine, and COVID-19. And the title of the submission today is Flavored e-cigarette Use at the Time of Quitting, Comparison between young adults 18 to 24 years old and adults more than 24 years old.
Hello everyone, I'm going to present a study examining flavored electronic cigarette use at the time of quitting smoking and comparing two different age groups, young adults aged 18 to 24 years old and older adults more than 24 years old. No funding was provided for this study. We know that the issue of flavored electronic cigarettes and electronic cigarettes in general is a very hot and controversial topic with opposing views on whether flavors are helpful for smokers to quit or they are marketed simply to attract youth. Research on flavors use by young adults has been rather conflicting. Studies have shown that young adults prefer non-tobacco flavors at a higher rate compared to older adults, and some have also shown that initiation of such flavors is associated with continuous use. Others suggest that there is no difference in terms of the risk of future smoking initiation in youth and young adults when using non-tobacco versus tobacco flavors. However, the use of non-tobacco flavors is associated with higher odds of subsequent smoking cessation among older adults. So the study was a cross-sectional online survey in a convenient sample of adults aged 18 years or more. They responded to an online question examining patterns, current and past patterns of smoking. We recorded if those who reported being former smokers were using e-cigarettes at the period of quitting smoking, and then we examined the flavor use patterns at that time. About 51,500 were former smokers who were using electronic cigarettes daily or some days of the past 30 days at the time of quitting smoking. These are the demographics of the study participants. These parameters were used in the logistic regression analysis, so we presented adjusted prevalence odds ratios. The vast majority, first of all, but more adults than young adults, were using everyday electronic cigarettes at the time of quitting smoking. Adults had a stronger opinion concerning the fact that they would definitely be smoking today at the time of the survey had they not initiated the cigarette use. There were differences in nicotine concentration used at the time of quitting. There were some difference from the bivariate analysis. Characteristically, when asking about the single flavor most often used, by far fewer young adults were using tobacco flavors compared to older adults, about 6 times lower. However, tobacco flavors were not at all popular in both groups. With flavor choices, we see that in both groups, the most frequently used, the most popular flavors were fruit, dessert, pastry, bakery, and candy, chocolate, sweet flavors. When we looked at flavors use even among polyflavor users, so when we asked them to report any kind of flavor that they were using and they could choose more than one answer, and also when we asked for the single most often used flavor, we saw that young adults were less likely, about 40 to 50% less likely to use tobacco flavors compared to older adults, while for fruit flavors, they were about 60 to 80, 90% more likely to use fruit flavors at the time of quitting. Higher prevalence was observed among young adults compared to older adults for menthol and for mint wintergreen flavors. In conclusion, this cross-sectional study of a convenient sample of adult vapors showed that non-tobacco flavors are popular at the time of quitting smoking, particularly fruit and dessert pastry bakery flavors. However, when we looked at young adults versus older adults, we found that non-tobacco flavors, especially these two groups, but also menthol and mint wintergreen, were more popular among young adults compared to older adults. Research should be expanded on population representative samples, and of course, ideally, we should have cohort studies with longitudinal follow-up in which we will monitor flavors used from the time of a cigarette use initiation up to the time of quitting smoking, so that we will longitudinally examine the dynamic changes in flavors, preferences, and use over time.
Thank you very much for that. Farsalinos, would you like to add any comments?
Yes. The purpose of the study is that there are a lot of studies examining preferences, flavor preferences, comparing youth with adults, and also specifically young adults versus older adults. But no one has looked at what's happening when people are trying to quit, and what are the preferences at the time of quitting smoking for these two groups, because there are many young adults who smoke and are using these products in order to quit smoking. And that was the purpose of our study. It was a secondary analysis of the survey that we published last year in Harm Reduction Journal. This time we just separated the two groups and we looked only at those participants who reported that they were using electronic cigarettes at the time that they had quit smoking. So out of a total of 70,000 participants in this study, 51 something were included in this analysis. As I mentioned, the major limitation of the study is that the population sample was non-representative, so we need to expand this research. It's mainly a proof of concept study, and I think that we need to look at what's happening when these people quit and not just discuss about preferences without taking into consideration the smoking status and the changes in the smoking patterns in this group.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the audience?
On this subject, do you know of more economical studies? Because you show there, or you're open to replication, to show that preference. Nevertheless, people less than 18 or less than 25 are a quantity of individuals far smaller than the more than 25 up to 75. So the economic sentence at the beginning, that was it's marketed. How economically is it intelligent to say it's marketed to people that are so small and have so few revenue compared to 10 times or 20 times more people that have more money and more reasons to buy the product?
Well, I can't say that I really understand the question. You're talking about the cost of buying the products?
No, the amount. If there is the sentence at the beginning, the thing you wanted to investigate is there a marketing of fruit or some flavors to a certain category of people? There is the preference side, but also the economical side.
We didn't examine how marketing is applied to different population groups. As far as their financial economic status, we did include a question about their annual income, and that was included in the logistic regression analysis. So the odds ratios that you saw in the table are adjusted prevalence odds ratios in which all demographics were added into the logistic regression model. So we included sex, gender, age, not age because the age groups were separate. We included education and their economic status. We asked about the average annual family income, which is a very common question addressing the economic. So all these odds were adjusted for a factor being their income.
Is it your impression that there is a difference between these younger age groups and older age groups when it comes to flavors to transition out of smoking?
Yeah, it shows that it's a possibility. I think that we only need to check it through a population representative sample. Ideally, a cohort study, so looking at smokers from the time of initiating e-cigarette use in an attempt to quit up to the point of quitting, so following them longitudinally throughout this period and look at what they start with, what they're using at some point when they manage to quit smoking. You know, there was a separate question about what kind of flavor did you use when you started using electronic cigarettes, and a different question, what type of liquids, flavors you were using during the period of quitting smoking. So these two choices may be different. So ideally, the way of addressing this issue is by a longitudinal study. In a more, let's say, compromised way, but in an easier way, you can use population representative samples. The problem with my study and the population representative sample that looks at the past is a recall bias. People may not remember accurately what they were using, so you always introduce recall bias. The only way of perfectly addressing this by removing all sorts of bias is by recruiting people when they first start using e-cigarettes in an attempt to quit. So you recruit smokers at the time that they start using e-cigarettes and you monitor flavors. In that case, you're also going to monitor transitions over time, but in real time, so at the time that they're doing it, and not asking about past, habits and changes in their behavior. Ricardo.
Follow on. Is there any chance, Konstantinos, that we can resurrect longitudinal studies from this one?
Well, of course, it's an idea. As you know, Ricardo is a co-author in the study, so he's very familiar with the case. And he was also co-author in the study with this sample that we published last year. So, of course, it's a trigger to do a longitudinal study. This is going to need a lot of resources because you need to have people who will recruit participants on site at the sales point or online for those who are buying online. You need to have a questionnaire at the beginning, and you need to follow them up ideally with repeated short questionnaires during the next period, every 2 months, every 3 months, whatever. You need to record the time that they have managed to quit smoking and look at their habits in that period. So technically, it can be designed. Of course, it's going to be much more complex than what we did, which was much simplified in terms of methodology. But I think it's quite feasible, It's going to take time, of course, yeah?
Perhaps I didn't make myself very clear.
Yeah.
With this particular population, do we have...
Okay. Yeah. Addressing a different questions now, like the transitions over this time. Yes, we have. We asked permission from them to give us the email address if they wanted to. A lot, I don't remember how many, but we do have email addresses. And yes, we can do a follow-up and looking at trends in flavor use over time. Not only trends in flavor use, but any sort of transitions in product use. For example, relapse back to smoking, continuous use, or stop using e-cigarettes all the time at all, or changes in nicotine concentration. So, yeah, they're not going to address the same question. That was what I didn't understand. But we can address different designs. I also have a cohort group. 7 years old, which was a representative sample of vape shop customers in Greece. So we went in 14 vape shops, which were randomly selected in Greece out of a list of more than 70 vape shops at that time, 2017. And we chose every third customer entering the shop to buy products for themselves, not for others. So we have a somewhat more representative sample, about 300 plus vapers. And that's, that's by definition a representative group of vapers at that time, vape shop customers, but in a large extent, vapers at that time, where you can do much more research, smaller sample size, but much more valuable in terms of the sample selection.
Yeah, we have one final question here.
Two brief questions. First, I did a quick Google Scholar search and I can't find the paper. So is it publicly available yet? And second, I'd be very interested, I was looking through your odds ratios and I didn't see candy as one of the flavors. I'd just be interested, was candy flavors something that you investigated? I think it would be...
We used the classification that is being used by the FDA. So Chris Russell was responsible for that. He was also one of the co-authors. Unfortunately, he informed that he left. So we used the classification of flavorings based on FDA recommendations. So, and that's why you see all these, for example, candy, chocolate, bakery, they were the same group. Some other sweet flavors were in another group. It's not that we personally decided to make that sort of a classification. We used the FDA guidelines, and we mentioned that in the paper that we published last year, which was an overview of the whole study sample, where we presented flavor preferences at e-cigarette use initiation, at the time of quitting, but without separating the two age groups, and at the time of the survey, which was on average 12 or 16 months after e-cigarette use initiation. So this classification was quite complex, I must say, but based on FDA recommendations. Yeah. The problem, sorry, one comment. There is a problem today with that sort of classifications. Those classifications were much more valid several years ago. Now flavorings are becoming more complex. So you have a combination of fruit and sweet flavors in one liquid. How is the user going to classify that? As a fruit flavor or as a sweet flavor? You may have two vapors classifying it differently, the same liquid, because for one may feel that the fruit notes are more prominent, the other one may feel that the sweet notes are more prominent. So the complexity, e-cigarettes started by having what I called at that time, in quotes, clean flavors. So you had fruit flavors. There was one fruit, peach, and that was pure peach. It was pure watermelon, pure strawberry. Now you have strawberry, caramel, vanilla, biscuit flavor, one flavor. So, and it's expected because you expect that sort of combinations to happen. You have tobacco flavors with a lot of sweet, fruity, mint notes. So it's quite complex, and with that kind of classification, it makes it very difficult and unfortunately very subjective for a vapor to classify his choice in one category. Maybe we should allow them to classify them in different categories, but that creates other problems. But in general, this ability to create as complex a flavor as you want creates problems for research, unfortunately.
Thank you. So I think in the interest of time, thank you very much for this presentation and the good discussion.